the 14th of December 2022, and you're very welcome back to Real True Education, not fake news. I'm just doing this video on the kitchen table here, and I don't have my board Real True Education, not fake news, with me, but this is part of it. This is corruption of the law, corruption of the planning law, and it's 51H part 1, and it's a bit like my struggle, what I get up to and the things I get up to. I'm not boasting, but I do believe my activities, along with a few more, have seriously upset our corrupt government and helped to kill their corruption in relation to law. What they're doing is, when you don't use the law, they put through their corruption. When you do use it, they try to change the law to defeat you, so that you can't. They keep ahead of you by changing the law as to get to know. Now, years ago, I was faced with Rara Wind Farm in Cavan and in Kingscourt and Carrickmacross area, and I had no one to turn to. I searched around looking for help. Eventually, when it was too late, I found out Pat Swords and a few more. And I said, that'll never happen again. No community will ever be stuck for information. And that is exactly what I've done. I've left communities all over the place, fully armed with all the best law that there is. And now the government is trying to change it, and I'll be dealing with the change in part 2 of this video. So now, the first thing to remember is that the Artists Convention was brought up about 40 years ago, after more or less totalitarian regimes like North Korea and all that sort of stuff. They bulldozed and destroyed castles and antique places and places of historical interest in the name of their new ideology. In other words, their idea was blast everything that's there. And that's a bit the same as the cancel culture of the woke crowd now, take down statues and all that. So the EU and the whole world, including the United States, Canada, and most European countries and Australia and all these countries, signed up to the Artists Convention in our house in Denmark. And it was introduced in Ireland begrudgingly in 2012, following complaints to the Artists Compliance Committee by people associated with myself. And that committee is a retired crowd of people who rule on the committee. But they've sanctioned Ireland several times, said Ireland's not in compliance with this international convention, and Ireland still refuses to comply, except for a little bit here and there. Now, it's built on that convention and built on the EU law and the treaties on the functioning of the EU, and the Lisbon Treaty was the SEA Directive, the Strategic Environmental Assessment Directive. And in that, it had the need for an environmental report. In other words, before you set out on a public plan or programme, like a government plan or a regional plan, you must comply with the directive and produce an environmental report. You sit down with your engineers, your planning experts and all, your mappers and all, and you draw up a report on what the environmental impact of what you're proposing is, but also the need for the project as well. So now, so you have to specify the need, NEED, for the program. If I said project, I'm wrong. A project's different. There are 3 concepts in Irish planning law: a plan or program, which is under the SEA Directive, usually a public plan or program. An environmental impact assessment, that's a project, and then a development is something under the Planning Development Act, which is like a house, or an ordinary house, or like that, or building some kind of a shed or that. So as I say, my promise was, and I'm sorry for the bit of interference on the phone, it's clicking there for some reason, was in 2010 that no one would ever be left needing advice on these laws, and that's exactly what I've delivered on, to great joy of myself and many communities. So the thing about the SEA environmental report, it sets the framework for future planning applications for projects. So if they wanted to mine gold in 4 areas of Ireland, Cork, Monaghan, Mayo and Wicklow, they'd have to do, with public support, or even if there's any public involvement, they'd have to do an EIA on the prospect of gold mining in Ireland. And they'd look at the various regions where it's feasible and all that sort of stuff. And then when they'd get that through and passed, they could then apply for planning permission for projects. That would be an individual gold mine in Monaghan or somewhere else, all this sort of stuff. But the thing about the SEA is it's the overarching national plan, whereas EIA is the local one. Now 2419 was the first break we got because we'd been trying to get into the courts and they blocked us. The European Court of Justice, they blocked us. But it doesn't really mean the court itself is corrupt. It means that the process getting up there is blocked by the EU and by the Irish National Government at their demand. And 2419 was the first case in Belgium where the wind energy guidelines, the guidelines drawn up to advise planners on where to place wind turbines, were found to be in breach of EU law because they were never put through the SEA process. Okay, so that's a very big case. It wasn't too long till I was on to that. So and the other one then is the Friends of the Irish Environment, which you would think wouldn't be on my side. I don't know what they're up to, but they have taken a case that the whole thing is contrary to the SEA directive, and we've already tried that and didn't get there, but they're going a different way. We tried to get in directly into the European Court of Justice. They went through the High Court. The High Court threw it out. They went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled unanimously that it had to go to Europe for consultation to be ruled on by the European Court of Justice, and that's going on at the moment. This is driving our government mad. Our Irish politicians, the Green Party, Fine Gael, is driving them absolutely bananas. Now, I've been pushing this in videos. How do I know? Maybe that group did take some of it advice, but it's all great, it's all good anyway. Now the next thing is the Environmental Impact Assessment Directive, and that's the directive on the local project. But what the government was trying to do was they were trying to get the EIA, the local project, as going on without the overarching plan or program, so that they didn't have to analyse what the wind energy did, what the pylons did or anything. They just had to deal with the immediate environmental effects, moving a pylon a bit to one side or moving a windmill to one side or whatever. Do you understand that? Whereas the law is that the whole lot must be contained, and the regulations and the guidelines for it must all be contained in the SEA environmental report. Now, among the things that are named specifically in Article 3.2, if you're getting the SEA directive 20142 EC, get the LEX one, LEX. You'll see Curia and LEX, get the proper one. Each directive has a preamble, which is only advisory, it's not binding. It has the articles, which are binding, and has the annex, which rules what the articles refer to. Now, so what do they cover? Agriculture. The waste management scheme in 2008 and 2007, that should have been covered. It was never done, but nobody challenged it. Agriculture, energy, and this is why all of this energy should have been put through the SEA. Now, another one that I don't think I have written in there is forestry. And a politician told me the reason that politician wouldn't push this in the Dáil was they're afraid that forestry will be brought in under the SEA, and the government will have to do an SEA on forestry, and that would not be good for her voters. But that's the proper thing. Our forestry plans and programs are proceeding without any proper authority, and technically speaking, if it went wrong, every bit of those trees has to be taken out and thrown out. That's what's happening in Derrybrien Wind Farm. Now, so tourism. Now, one of the interesting things about tourism is if tourism had so many beds for tourists, how would they use the migrants? They're now dumping out the whole tourist industry and filling all the hotels with migrants. So there'll be nowhere for tourists to stay. So there's an example where the SEA directive would have stopped that going on. They'd have to do another amendment to it to do what they're doing. Now, the other thing then is fishery. These salmon farms would have to be included, and there'd have to be a look at that, and people are trying to challenge that. And river basin management, that's the flood management and all of that. And extraction of metals and other stuff, that's another one, like mining and all that, as I said. There's a few more there, and then there's another one if it has a significant impact on the environment. But you're getting the basic thing of it. It's the same as if you buy a pub, you have to have a license on the premises, and then the premises has to be licensed. Only then can you apply for to be a publican. You can't apply to be a publican on a premises which doesn't have a license. That's fairly basic. Now, I think you probably understand that. So the next thing then is the articles of the SEA directive. Article up 1 to 2, 3 and 4 deal with how the environmental report has to be drawn up and what has to be in it, and the Irish Convention has been accepted by the Irish courts reluctantly as being persuasive. So the directive is binding, but the Convention is persuade. So you can use it to persuade a judge. So there's the involvement of state bodies. This is like on Tashka, which I find are useless. Friends, what do you call them? Birds, the bird crowd, Irish wild birds or whatever it is. They're no good either. They're all for this. So they all have to be consulted, and that looks good. And of course, we consulted with all the bodies, right? But here's where they're caught. Here is where they are caught. They're caught. Public participation. Public participation. There was a specific directive on public participation, but they've incorporated some of this into these two directives, the EIA and SEA directive, public participation, and that includes this fella, a farmer, a farmer, and a few other fellas as well, a few other notorious people who are really causing problems. And this is where they're called public participation. The right of the public to be informed when all options are open, to have their submissions taken into account, and reasons given for any decision that's made. And that is where we have them caught. Not only that, we have the access to information on the environment directive. We can actually demand of them what information they have, and we're doing it, and we have them up the wall on this as we speak. We're asking them, have they an environmental report? Several groups have done it for the 2006 wind energy guidelines, and they used to always answer in time, but this time they don't know what to do. The Irish government is really up the wall with Mad Ryan and a few more of them up there, and Leo Varadkar kissing Leo. So anyway, the next thing is we have public participation. That's where they're caught. That is where they're caught. Now, the number 7 is transboundary. So they have to inform neighbouring countries. So if you're in Switzerland, you have to inform Germany. If you're in Germany, you have to inform Holland and Belgium and all that sort of stuff. And here we'd have to notify Northern Ireland. But of course, Northern Ireland is more woke than the South, so it doesn't do much good. But they still have to tell them if they didn't do it, they're entitled to be consulted. And in the North-South Interconnector, they just wrote a sentence. They didn't show any interest at all. Now, key to this then is that there's a judicial review process. If they don't tick the boxes, you can take a judicial review. And the O'Keefe principles is that you can't really win on a decision that's made, provided they tick all the boxes, provided they consider all the aspects. If they leave anything out of it, you can challenge them. And because of the law and the Planning Act, it's an absolute minefield. Oh my word. It would be some job to get into the head of anybody. And luckily there's a consolidated version online, and only for that the courts would have to shut down. There's no judge, and I wouldn't blame a High Court judge or a Supreme Court judge for not being able to follow it completely. So the judicial review process, I've taken 3 of them, and I've been involved in several others, and Northeast Pile and Pressure Group took 1 too. And key to that is that the access to justice on an environment must not be prohibitively expensive. And various member states have been forced to bring in things like that. There's the Edwards case in England, which means that it should be roughly whatever you have to pay if you lose should be connected to your income. So if you're very rich, you should have to pay a good lot. If you're not too rich, you shouldn't have to pay too much. In Ireland, it's simple. Each side pays their own. So if you go in as an individual, a lay litigant doing it yourself, you're only out the cost of the articles, the affidavit and the statement of grounds. The whole lot of stamp and duty it's under 500 quid, and then you have your subsistence and travel and all of that. If you win, you get it back. I won 1 case and I got 2,400 back off on Bord Pleanála. Bord Pleanála has their own legal department. They have their own legal department, but they never take part in a judicial review. Isn't that something? The people who advise Bord Pleanála on the law have never had to go into court and defend any of their work. They always hire outside legal teams. Like, there's several. I better not mention anyone. Hayes, Cunningham, Hayes. There's Hayes, Curran, and somebody else. Anyway, there's several companies does it, and Philip Lee is another. Anyway, that's all right. They're just doing their job now, and could be on the board side one time, and they could be on our side the next time. That's the thing about lawyers. Now, but anyway, the first thing I did when I first wanted to make a promise that I would advise communities, the next thing I set out was to get a team of barristers, to get lawyers. I've driven as far as Cork to meet lawyers, and I've been putting a lot of energy into getting lawyers that we can trust and that are prepared to go along and work with us. And after 12 years, I think we're reasonably there. We're almost there. It means that if communities collect money and pay lawyers, that I'm reasonably sure that they're not going to chicken out or back down on the steps of the court or be bought off. I mean, you get a young barrister or even a senior counsel in financial difficulties, it'd be well worth the wind farms company to give them $1 million to lose a case, or even bribe a judge. Maybe God help us, but that's all of this is possible. So the best way to look at this is you go all the way towards the Supreme Court, and it's expensive. It gets expensive. So my efforts to have a national organisation to do this were shot down by several groups themselves, and they have the wind turbines on their neighbourhood because they refused to go along with my plan. That's another day's work. Now, the protective cost order applies to the SEA directive, the EIA directive, the Habitats directive, and the pollution control directive, and it also applies to an injunction, where you take an injunction against the board or the council where they're not complying with the law, and you get protective costs. So that's the thing there. Now, then there's access to information requests. You can apply for access to information on the environment. I'm one of the few people who can really do it properly. If you leave a loophole at all, they'll get out. There's no loophole in my work, and I help groups all over the country to do these. And at the moment, the government is showing a reluctance to comply with that for the first time. You put it into the council or whatever, if they don't give you the answer, you ask for an internal review by a person of higher rank. If they don't give you the answer or a proper answer, you then apply to the Ombudsman in Dublin, and that could take 6 months. So what I have done, and I'm taking a good lot of credit for this, we are getting the access to information requests in months, if not years, before the wind farm applies. The minute there comes any kind of an information or any kind of a statement that there's a wind farm coming in Ballydee, Murphy, or somewhere else, in goes the access to information straight away. We have all our homework done. We don't have to wait until they grant the planning permission. The documentation is there, or else that the state refused to grant it. And we have what our submission is. We have a report. John Dooley got it from Bord Planola, that they're not going to comply with any of these directives as long as it's government policy. So that can be used then in your case when you go ahead. That's an exhibit against them, using their own information against them. We fight fairly tough. So that's the thing. Now, what we're going to do now, folks, is I'm going to leave it at that and come back now to a newspaper article and the current way the government is now trying to overcome us by changing the whole law and breaking the Constitution, EU law, and all, and what will be the way we have to deal with them. I wouldn't be at all surprised if the departments and the government are not looking at my videos on this stuff. Good on you. I met every one of them. I met Darren O'Rourke for Sinn Féin. I didn't meet Johnny Gurk, but I know he knows about this in there. I met Matt Carthy. I didn't meet Pauline Tully. I don't think she'd even be interested, but she's onto this. Brendan Smith, TD of Cavan Monaghan. I told Niamh Smith that an election count one day. Heather Humphreys was told it in detail. I met Eamon O'Keefe. I met Pat Rabbitt when he was the minister. I met Damien English. I met several more. I might name them underneath here, the ones I met. We met the whole Department of Energy, 5 representatives, me and a helper, and we wiped the floor on them in Dublin, I think it was somewhere on Adelaide Road or up there. We met them and we pointed out all of this, and they laughed at us. So the next thing then is we met AirGrid. We met them all, and we've been making submissions to public consultation on this, and we're slowly but surely dragging the Irish government into compliance with the law on our behalf. And I think that is a great job, very enjoyable work. You wouldn't have better fun, better friends, and everything. Great crack, and you get to know communities all over the world. So that's it. We'll see you back now. We're going to deal with the recent article in the newspaper, what they're going to do. Give me a thumbs up if you agree, if you like this, and give me a thumbs down if you don't. Thank you.